Welcome back to the Diver Guide channel, and today we're talking about reverse 1.5 pike. This is one of my favorite dives to talk about, so I'm super excited for this one, and I hope you guys get a lot of value out of it. Please hit the subscribe button so I get pushed to more and more people that are interested in learning about diving, and with that said, let's get into it. This is like an upper intermediate level dive, and it's hard to master because it requires good fundamentals, but it also takes technique to a whole new level. If you're learning this dive, you should have a solid reverse dive pike. You should understand how to press out and change your press depending on how fast your legs come up so that way you can adjust. That's important to be able to do at this point. And you should also have a back 1.5 pike at some level. It doesn't need to be perfect yet, but what's important is that you understand how to pop from the toes and you've been practicing that with the back 1.5, and you can kind of understand how a reverse 1.5 would feel if you just turned around. And lastly, you should obviously have a reverse 1.5 tuck. I think that goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. And now, to do reverse 1.5 pike, it takes those skills to another level, like I said. You have to be able to pop from the toes, the spotting has to be better, your pressing and ability to control your core on the come-outs is important, and obviously board timing as well. So I'm going to go over some common mistakes that you'll see, and then I'll get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more where I'll do a deep dive on a perfect reverse 1.5, which I highly recommend you listen to because I'm going to point out things that I wish I knew when I was younger and the things that took me forever to figure out. Okay, so the first mistake I want to go over that's super common is rolling with your shoulders or throwing your head back on the takeoff. There are two main problems with this that I can see. If you throw your shoulders back and head back too much, then you run the risk of being too close to the board. This usually won't happen in the beginning, but as you get more comfortable with the dive, you'll stay on the board longer. And if you're pulling your body back as you're leaving the board and you're getting a good board ride, it'll keep you too close to the board. The second issue that I can see with this is that it keeps your upper body and lower body disconnected. And what I mean by that is on this takeoff, as you can see, the upper body goes flying back and it takes your legs a really long time to get all the way up so that you can get into the pike. Along with that, if your head is back, this is exactly what can happen. It doesn't always happen, but if your head is back and you're looking up, that means your spot is going to be a little early and you'll have to wait longer because you're in a big pike to get your legs all the way up before you can come out. So it just doesn't end up looking really good. Like I said, it's disjointed. And how you fix that is by looking into the pike. So here's an example of that. He's falling forward on the board, but he still looks forward towards his legs as they come up to him before getting into the pike. This not only creates a safer board ride and takeoff position, but it also allows him to get into his pike faster and more clean. And when we do a deep dive later on, I'll talk about how your core impacts this as well. But for now, it just allows you to get into a deeper pike, which really helps with your takeoff. The last thing that I'll mention on this is that it messes with your arm swing timing. If the head goes back and the shoulders go back, then the arms don't get a chance to get by your ears or even behind your ears where they should be on the takeoff because your shoulders moved prematurely. Ideally, you let your arms come all the way up, and yes, you're going to have your shoulders come back a little bit. Your head should not move back at all on the takeoff, but the shoulders are going to slide a little bit, but that's also to counteract the hips that are moving up and away, which we'll talk about more later. The arms do a lot to generate some momentum on this dive, so if your arms can't get up all the way, then you're cutting off a lot of potential speed and elegance on the takeoff. The judges are also going to be looking for lines on the board and off the board. The better lines that you can show off on the board and in the air, the better your scores will be. The second common mistake on this dive is going through your knees. And I want to preface this by saying it's almost impossible to not have your knees move forward a little bit on this dive, but you do need to be aware of how much your knees are pushing out because it's going to disrupt the line coming off the board. As I just talked about, the arm swing is going to help generate a lot of the momentum to get the flip speed, but the other half of it, maybe even more, is coming from your lower body and core. When you leave the board, you want to be popping your toes up as much as possible and then engaging your hip flexors and quads to slam your legs up towards your face. If your knees bend too much, then you're losing all the power that your feet can generate by kicking or popping off the board, which is a problem for your flip speed. That's why when you see somebody do this correctly, the first move they make when they leave the board is that last bit of straightening out the legs before using their hip flexors to really drive their legs up into the pike. A good cue for this when you're leaving the board is feeling like you're flicking your feet off the board before bringing your shins up to your face. You can almost break it down into those two steps. For the third common mistake, which we already kind of touched on with the head being back on the takeoff, this is super important. When you're leaving the board, you have to be looking forward or maybe even down slightly towards the water, because you have to watch or at least be looking forward as your legs are driving up into your pike. This is going to unlock so much flip speed, and it's also going to make it easier to get into a better pike, and it will help you spot better too. There are only positives to having a good head position, so I would really recommend you practice that on your reverse dive and all your lead ups that you do on the back 1.5, on reverse 1.5 tuck. Also, make this into a consistent habit and you will get rewarded for it so much, I promise. And the last common mistake is just not getting into a good pike. You can still overcome this by being patient on the takeoff. Now, when you first learn this dive, you're not going to have a lot of patience. It's like when you learn any new dive, there's not a lot of patience involved. You just want to get it off. You want to do it as fast as possible usually. But as you settle into it, allow yourself time to pop your toes and bring your legs up and be patient. Let them come up all the way before you think about doing the rest of the flip, because that power that you generate from the legs will make your flip speed faster, but it will also let you get into that tight position that will also make you spin faster. On your entries, try to be aware of how much you're pulling on the come out. Sometimes people will get way too archy and not know when to stop pulling for their entry. Really, you want to be engaging your core and pressing out, similar to how you would on a back 1.5 if you can do it there. You kind of want to transfer it over. And there are other mistakes that people make, like trying to leave the board too early, pushing out too far with their hips potentially, which will move them away from the board too much, and not coming out at the right time. I'm not going to really talk about the spotting of this dive, but just to get a little nerdy for a second here and do a little math with you. When you're doing a reverse or inward, you're moving in the X direction the opposite way that you're spinning, which means you have to kick a little bit later than you would for a front or a back, where you're moving in the X direction, the same direction that you're spinning. So your momentum carries with you on a front or back, but when you're doing a reverse or inward, your spinning momentum is going to be slowed down because you're moving away from the board the other way. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. But basically all I'm trying to say is that you have to wait a little bit longer to let your legs come up a little bit higher before you press out on a reverse compared to a back. This is lessened if you stand up the dive really well, but I'm assuming in the beginning or at different periods in your diving career, you're going to be pushing out, which means that you're going to have to wait a little bit longer to come out of the dive. Okay, now that we've gone over all of the common mistakes and some other random mistakes that people make, let's do a really deep dive on this really, really great reverse 1.5. Probably one of the best examples on the internet that I could find. Now, before she even does the dive, the first thing that you can notice is how stable her body is as she walks down the board. She stays upright the whole time. There's no dips in her shoulders as she goes from the 2-step into the hurdle step. Her arms bend slightly to get them up to the top. I wouldn't recommend that. If you can keep them straight, that's awesome. As you can see here, not a big deal. Her knee drive is out in front. Her foot stays in line with her other foot. And then at the peak of this jump, she's completely straight. Her arms are maybe slightly in front, so her line isn't perfect, but it's a very, very good line coming down for this last jump. And as she comes down for that last jump, she starts her arm circle backwards, which looks good. And I would say that as she's landing, her head is actually coming up a little bit too high. You can see her face is pointing up slightly. I think it's beneficial to keep it down, but that's only because generally if somebody's head is there right at this point in the dive, that means that as they come up, their head will continue to go back. But she doesn't do that. She actually looks in more. So this is her release point. Her hips are moving forward compared to her shoulders and feet. Her arms are already behind her ears, slightly bent. And like I was saying before, the first motion is straightening out her knees. And then once her knees are straight, the whole leg drives up very quick and she gets into a very deep pike. The issue that you'll see with her is that she has such a command of the board and she has so much height and flip speed that she does not need to stay in the dive very long, which will probably be different for you. So she already starts to open up as her feet pass 6 o'clock. You can see she's already pressing out, which makes her spotting amazing. So she's just watching her feet point out across the water. She presses super flat. Her arms are still on her legs, which is super impressive. Usually you see people move too quick and their hands are already motioning motioning for the entry, but she has so much time that she doesn't need to do that. She looks back slightly and brings her arms in for the entry, but notice how she stops pulling at a certain point. After she's pressed and looked back, she doesn't continue to arch her back. She keeps that same position as the hands come through, and she just stretches for the water and executes probably one of the best knee saves of all time, because you can see that as she's going in, the momentum would carry her feet more, but she just nails the timing on the knee save, and her legs just stay pointed up completely straight. Let's take a look at this angle where you can see a little issue that she has. She comes through and she bends the arms, which you do see a lot of times with divers. And it's not that your arms have to be perfectly straight at the top to make the dive great or to have good form. It's more for the look of it for the judges. Her elbows are pretty bent. One last tip I have for you guys is to land on the board for that last jump with a core that's engaged. If you land on the end and your hips are rotated back a little bit and you have your core engaged really well, you'll be able to stay strong as you do that last arm circle and jump to be in a position where your legs can pop off the board really well. If you quote unquote break at the hips, that means that your core is a little bit too weak for the force of the board, and it's causing your legs and upper body to become kind of disconnected. For that, I would practice your hurdles on the pool deck, and as you do it, really think about hollow hips and a hollow core as you're doing your arm circles and jumps. All right, I hope you guys got a lot of value out of that. If you liked it, hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to tell all your friends about this. And if you want to reach out, feel free to go to my website and submit a contact form. It goes directly to me, and I'll get back to you ASAP. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next one.